The Shockwaves VideoCast, presented by
Bob Nalbandian,
host of the Shockwaves /Hard Radio podcast on hardradio.com and the Shockwaves Skull Sessions podcast on roadrunnerrecords.com/Skull Sessions.
All right, Shockwaves VideoCast. I'm here with my partner, Carl Alvarez, and we are here with Mr. Metal Blade himself, Brian Slagel. What is going on there, Brian?
How you doing, man?
How you doing, my friend?
Doing all right.
30 years of Metal Blade. That's what we're here to talk about. Been 30 years since you started the label with the first Metal Massacre record. And, of course, Brian and I, as well as Carl, go way back. Even before Metal Massacre and Metal Blade Records, we're going to go back to what probably started it all, was the new Heavy Metal Review fanzine. Okay. Carl's got his bag of tricks right here.
Oh, nice.
He's like Felix the Cat, man. He's got... and this one
That's
I never got. Issue number 2.
With the wonderful Iron Maiden on the front cover. Perfectly.
First issue I saw was with Riot. Was that number 3? That was number 3.
3, very good.
In fact, let me see if Brian remembers this. First time I met with Brian Slagel, he was with John Cornarins, his partner, at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel record swap meet. Pre-Oz Records, you were selling records. And I remember the 2 records I bought. Because back then in the day when you were buying records, you didn't have a chance to hear about these bands on the internet or anything. You would read about them. And I read from Pen Pals. I had Aardschok and all these European magazines about Trust and Ocean. I bought the first Trust and Ocean album. And I remember you go, dude, those are great records, man. And I brought them home, totally killer records. So first recommendation, my first meeting with Brian. And I picked up his magazine, which actually led me to start my own fanzine there, Headbanger, back in the day. Why don't we talk about those eras, when you were actually selling at the record swap meet, and what got you into the whole metal game?
I started selling, I have to admit I was a bootlegger in the early days, so that's where I started.
We all collected bootlegs.
That's where I started selling cassette tapes, actually, at the old Capitol Record swap meet in the parking lot there.
Once, yeah.
So I started there when I was in high school, I think. And that kind of got me into the whole metal thing, because I was into, like Kiss and AC/DC and all that sort of stuff. Thin Lizzy, all of the great 70s bands. And then a friend of mine in Sweden sent me an AC/DC live tape from Stockholm or someplace. And at the end of it, he said, oh, you might like this new band Iron Maiden. He put the Soundhouse tapes on the end of it. I was freaking out, going, wow, this is really cool.
79, 80? Right,
that would be 79, probably late 79, something like that. So I started to hear about that sort of stuff through Sounds and some of these other magazines. That started the fanzine because of my love of that whole scene over there. I was writing for Kerrang and Sounds as well. Then, ended up working at the record store. And actually, I think by the time I met you, I was working at the record store. We're selling, because this is where I got the records from. The record store was selling at some of the swap meets.
Well, that was the thing, because I live down in Orange County, and I think people got to realize, going back to the late 70s into the early 80s, I mean, I would drive, over an hour to go to Oz to find out the great, all these imports, because you couldn't find them at many places. There were a couple of stores in Orange County and Long Beach. You had Zed's, you had Music Market, but Oz Records, and there were certain places in Hollywood, Moby Disc, and other places in the Valley that you could find just killer imports. So we were coming up on weekends here and there, driving up 60 miles just to buy records. We'd make a full day of it. And,
you were the buyer and the owner, correct?
I did not own it. No, there was another owner there. I just had to convince him to let me buy stuff, which was not so easy. But no, I was just buying stuff and selling it. Not the owner. I had no money. Are you kidding me?
But right there, that was the key to what started really the metal scene. If you think because that was all the, not only the big bands. I mean, Maiden and that stuff was sold domestically, but you were bringing in the Angel Witch, Diamond had all the neat record singles. A lot of these European bands, Picture, Bodine, the French bands, Ocean, Trust, Warning. And this really brought that to the States. And if it wasn't for people like you, no one would hear this, because, you couldn't get on the internet. It was just through tape trading, basically, through pen pals.
That was the most fun about working at the store, was just turning people on, because you get people come in and say, oh, I like this band. Say, well, if you like that, listen to this. And then it kind of would snowball from there, that was the most fun.
Now, tell me, when you started Metal Blade, it was actually, you had the new Heavy Metal Review. You and John Cornarins started that fanzine. You did up till about what the third issue is when you decided to do the compilation album, right? And Metal Blade just started off.
I can't remember
This is the first
time frame.
This
Carl,
is the first time.
he's
Okay,
doing
was an
you
ad.
know. Okay,
That's
good.
just
So what
March.
issue is that? March of '82. Okay.
Okay.
UFO on the cover.
Yep.
So-
Let me see that.
That was when I started Headbanger Fanzine, March of '82.
Nice. Yeah, there's a lot of debate as to when this actually came out. So yeah, it must have been February or March of '82 that record.
Because there was no street date, so you got the piece
Who
and then
knows?
you
Yeah,
just put it out there.
yeah, it just kind of happened.
Well, it started on your
That's
own
the bootleg.
label, and then
That's
it went
the-
to Metalworks.
Yeah.
That was the Metalworks.
Well, I made
version.
every single possible mistake possible on that first time. I had no money. So when I got enough money to make 2,500 copies of the original version. And then when I ran out of money, everybody wanted more, and I had no way of fulfilling the orders. So foolishly, I licensed to this one company that never paid us, never paid anybody, took all the money and ran, which is that lovely
I know.
record.
We managed to put together the first Metal Massacre show at the Troubadour with Metallica, Malice, and Pandemonium, which was November of '82, Thanksgiving.
Yep.
You actually got that
Wow,
ass
nice.
flyer somewhere, right?
Oh, wow, that's sweet.
Come on, was the first one.
I have
Thanksgiving
seen
night.
that somewhere, yeah.
Yeah.
So by this time you're rolling into '83, and the records that you're putting out were mostly EPs, really, if you think about it.
Demon Flight, Armored
Well, yeah,
Saint.
the way the whole thing came about was I had no money, as I mentioned earlier. So after the whole fiasco with licensing the Metal Massacre, the people at Green World, which is one of the distribution
Torrance.
companies down there in Torrance, exactly, they came to me and said, "Well, we know you don't have any money, but you kind of seem like you know what you're doing. We'll offer you a pressing and distribution deal. In other words, we'll spend all the money to make the actual records if you can just bring stuff to us." So again, none of us having any money back then.
So this
The
is
best-
the Hine brothers.
This is the Hine brothers, yep.
Right. Bill and
So
Leslie.
I will not mention their names. Anyway, so the money we had, which was nothing, so that's why the EPs were the only thing we could really. Anybody could afford to do it. And the bands had to pay for them. So, like, Bitch had their own money. Demon Flight was kind of a studio band. excuse me, of guys who worked at the record store with me that had extra studio time just to do something, and then Armored Saint and everything else kind of came out. We're all EPs because that's all the money.
thought it
We
was
had enough to record.
I thought it was
basically.
interesting because it was a lower price. It gave people, they weren't putting down $10 to get it. They get it for $5. So, from a fan's perspective, you can get a taste of
Sure.
this band. So it worked out.
The magazine, New Heavy Metal Review, that started you with Metal Blade Records. Did you actually intend to start a label, or was it just,
No.
just kind of led to that?
By accident.
Not at all. I had no intention of ever starting a label. I was just trying to help the local LA bands do something. So the only way to really do that, and being really influenced by the new wave British heavy metal, was to do a compilation album, like Metal from Others.
I was going to say that.
all those. So I was inspired by that and just kind of did it. And then, oh hey, look at you! Everything I say
Hey, he's got the
appears
bag of
next
tricks,
second.
man.
I love it.
Well, this is
So-
where the magic started to happen, because by the time Metal Massacre 2 came out, this is April of '83, you think about the talent pool that's on this record, it starts to evolve.
Cliff Burton there.
Oh yeah,
You got
exactly.
Trauma, obviously Armored Saint.
Marty Friedman.
Say, yeah, that's
Jeff
right.
Martin.
Marty Freeman. I forgot about
Yeah.
that.
So-
yeah, Jeff. Oh, that's right. Jeff Martin.
Yeah, Jeff Martin from Surgical Seal, which
Yep.
Racer X, Badlands.
Yeah.
Of course, great Jason.
Yep.
So,
Session. Overkill.
yeah, Overkill.
Of course,
the
that's
LA
not.
Overkill.
Of course, that's not the New York
the punk
Overkill.
Yeah, that's right.
So there was
Nice.
the April '83 at the Troubadour, which was Metal Massacre 2 night. Did you go to that? This was.
I was
this
there,
one.
yeah. Armored
I was there.
Saint
I was there too.
Okay.
I was there.
Yeah.
Armored Saint just laid the place down. I mean, they just laid it flat.
They always
did.
Yeah.
No, they're
But especially this one. I remember this is the first time I actually seen them just lay the place down. So.
Well, the first time I ever saw them, that's what happened. I was blown away by how good I was just like, holy cow, this band's really professional and
yeah, they're very pro.
Oh yeah,
very
they
pro early
blew me
on.
away.
They're the band that literally started the Hollywood scene, the Hollywood clubs taking out all the tables and chairs. Because at an Armored
Yes.
Saint show, when the tables and chairs were there, they'd be gone by the end of the set.
So by this time, things were kind of really starting to flow. Everything's kind of falling into place. The EPs are out. Metal Massacres are out.
Yeah,
And then-
at this point, it was kind of becoming something. There were more and more bands were talking about the label, so it was easier to get bands to do it even outside. I mean, still most of these bands were all from LA, but there were still a few that came outside from Los Angeles. Although it became much more soon after.
And they were mostly just sending you demo tapes. You like the demo tape?
Yeah, that was
you
it.
have a master.
In the old way, by
Right.
Snail Mail.
Yep.
I think the first full-fledged record you put out.
That was the first one. Was You My
This was
Slave,
it,
bitch? Yep.
Which was summer of '83, if I'm not mistaken.
Sounds about right. It was always really stressful back then making these records because we had so little money that we had to get it done so fast. I remember making Be My Slave, and it was just everybody's super stressed because it's like, okay, we have X amount of studio time. If it's not done, it's not done. And we have no more money, so. But it came out pretty cool.
But you got it into the stores, which is the most important thing.
Finally, yes.
And did you cover pretty much the whole U.S.? And
Yeah, I mean, back then, it was still very, very small. So, I mean, you're getting records everywhere, but in very small increments. I mean, back then, 10,000 albums would be like a gold record for an independent label. Mm-hmm. So, we're probably selling 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 records, and all of them getting exported because we didn't. Trying to think, we first started licensing records to Roadrunner back in the early days, but I think
Music
that
for
was
Nations too. Probably.
Yeah. Well, Music for Nations got it. They did the UK, and then Roadrunner did the rest of Europe. We also did some stuff with Noise,
Right.
but that was not quite yet until I think it was a little bit after.
It's 85 probably.
Yep. Probably 80. I think it was 84 we started doing some of that stuff.
Because by that time, I think you had didn't you have Celtic Frost, like one of the
Mm-hmm.
records?
Yeah, we had licensed Celtic Frost
from
yeah.
Noise, right?
Hellhammer, I think, was the first thing
That's
that
right.
licensed.
Yeah.
Which I saw a review in Kerrang! It said it was the worst album ever recorded. I go, I have to have that record.
That's the interesting thing about Metal Blade. You found your hole completely, and it seemed to be the thing that worked because Metal Blade was really the antithesis of what the major labels started to sign metal-wise because they were more polished. The production tended to be a little bit, let me say, watered down in a sense.
Well, we were we still are really to this day, but it was just the underground stuff.
Well, you got to remember
what was out there.
Yeah, back then the U.S. labels weren't really signing metal because when this started, you had, maybe Motley Crue and then Quiet Riot in '83. But pre-'83, that was when the metal, when the US Festival hit, that was when metal kind of became mainstream. But we're talking pre-'83. There weren't many U.S. labels signing, and all the bands that were, great albums like Fire Down Under by Riot, all these American albums that were out, they weren't getting the push. They weren't really, major labels did not know how to market.
Usually one-off records. Manowar had one record.
Sure. You issued a lot of these classic albums from, the Riot first 3 albums with Guy Speranza, some of the Manowar records, of course, Diamond had a lot of the new Angel Witch, I think you did all Holocaust, Sweet Savage. You did all these great albums, and even when you were with Warner Brothers for a while, you put out some classic Thin Lizzy records. You reissued.
Thin Lizzy, Alice Cooper, Deep Purple.
Alice Cooper, Deep Purple, Come Taste the Band, yeah, and that was really cool because a lot of people that didn't have these records, they weren't really promoted well by the majors. You kind of gave it an extra push.
Well, the most fun about reissuing that stuff was taking, especially the Thin Lizzy stuff, taking it, remastering it, because at that point this stuff sounded horrible. Yeah. So we spent all this time remastering everything. I remember we were doing Black Rose, and the tape started to fall apart because these things were so old. Right. So I'm freaking out because I've got the original masters of Black Rose. It's falling apart. So we had the age-old thing is you bake it for 20 minutes and then it's all fine. But that was fun because even after we did that, almost every other reissue that people did, they used our mastering. Okay. And the Thin Lizzy people and everybody, even to this day, they're redoing all this stuff in the UK, and Steve Hammonds is putting it all together, doing a phenomenal job. Yeah. And they're doing Live Life, and he wanted the version that we did, the mastering that we did for them to use, which was all I have to do is say something. He has it there. So anyway, that was pretty cool.
And this was a great one. This was a gem that you.
Oh yeah, the Warrior. That's another one. Classic album that never got the push.
It never was put on CD.
Yeah, it was never put on CD. It was phenomenal. I mean, one of my favorite records from the early days, and how they even got a deal is still kind of bizarre. But yeah, it's fun.
They were on 10 Records, which was for the Virgin. But it never came out on CD. It was LP and cassette.
Well, it was MCA.
MCA.
But just on vinyl. Right.
Well, it's still to this day Fighting for the Earth. I was listening to it. Came up on my iTunes.
I just saw it
a couple weeks ago. Yeah, same way.
Yeah.
I was like, man, somebody's got to cover this song because it's so good. Yeah. It could be like a hit all over again. It wasn't really a hit back then.
So this is where it gets better. When Slayer came on board.
Yeah, bands you love.
This was 85, 86. This is where everything started to really get momentum for the label, really.
Yeah, I mean, well, it started to become a little bit more of a legitimate label at that point. I mean, still was, first 3 years were just me doing it in my mom's garage in the backyard of our house and Woodland Hills that had no air conditioning, which was really fun in the summertime. But yeah, it started to, as just more and more releases come out. I think, once we got to Slayer and Trouble and those sort of bands, it started to kind of become more of a actual.
Well, would you say Slayer was the band that really turned Metal Blade around, that gave it? I know that record you sold off.
I think
press-wise, definitely,
really worked.
but
And
record
truly,
sales-wise too. It was one of your bigger sales. Sales at the time,
look,
right?
back then it was still really super small. So I don't know that. Obviously, you look back at it now and they've become huge, but they were big then, but not really big. I think it was
as big as we think of it.
I think it was the succession of just so many in a row
Right.
that kind of did pretty well. I mean, Trouble and all these records kind of started coming fast and furious. more or less.
86.
Yeah, exactly.
Both of these records.
See again, Trouble. I say something and he has it in his hand.
But by '86, that was when the Slayer went on to Def Jam, right? It was 86.
Yep. I think they left in late '85.
Because out in
The 86 was an
so.
interesting year for metal because obviously Master of Puppets came out March of '86. That was the game changer, really.
Peace Cells.
But
Among
you had
the
Flotsam
Living
that came out
Yeah.
in
Flotsam,
October.
yep.
That was a big thing as well. And DRI. I mean, you were starting to get into.
Well, yeah,
different-
DRI and COC. Yeah, we started. We had to start a separate label because none of those bands wanted to be on Metal Blade.
Was that the Death Records?
Death Records, yeah.
Records,
So, which had, of course, DRI, COC, the Mentors, Dr. No, the Goo Goo Dolls.
We'll get into the Goo Goo Dolls, but one thing you mentioned, the Mentors. The funny thing about metal, I remember when the whole PMRC thing came out.
Oh, yeah.
It was like they thought they would crush metal, this and that, but obviously Metal Blade and bands alike just flourished. I mean,
Well, yeah,
seeing
they
the
gave
Mentors,
us
senators reading the Mentors lyrics on TV, it was just like...
It was a magic moment, really.
Well, there's I don't think it's up on. I think you can probably find it on YouTube. But it's one of the greatest moments because it's towards the end of the whole thing, and they started reading the lyrics. People started laughing hysterically, and whoever was presiding over it said, "If you guys laugh anymore, I'm shutting this off." So they started to reread the lyrics, and they started laughing hysterically. They finally said, "That's it," and stopped it. And I think that was right towards the end.
Right.
It was somebody. It was on YouTube before, so I think if you Google Mentors and PMRC, you might be able to find it.
I remember seeing that.
Classic stuff.
And I remember at the time, Kerry King and their then manager Steven would call me up and he'd go, 10 o'clock at night tonight, they're going to show us on the news. It was a huge thing for Slayer to be on national TV, and he was calling up everyone like so excited.
Sure.
They're gonna burn our records on TV. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be, So it was funny. They're thinking that this is going to totally ruin metal. All the metal bands were like, going, finally, we're getting the national...
Well, yeah, I mean, Twisted Sister, I mean, we had 5 of the top Dirty 10 or whatever they called it back then. So.
Yeah, but for Metal Blade, though, the MTV was evolving. You were starting to do videos, with your acts, So it started to give a different exposure besides just the magazines and word of mouth. So that was a big vehicle for you as well, with the probably key bands that you were
Sure.
choosing.
Well, eventually when Headbangers Ball came in, that was a big game changer because all of a sudden you had all these people that could see what you're doing. So that was a huge.
I have an old
huge
reel.
Oh, look at that. That is old. What's on
This
this?
is 87. 2 of your bands.
Yeah, Lizzie Against the World.
Me Against the World, yeah.
Anvil.
Yeah.
Obsession, which I guess that was kind of technically in Trouble. Not cool. Run to the Light, the infamous Bill Ward video.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Bill Ward was in that video.
So now we're getting into like 88, 89. You had struck a deal with Warner Brothers, I believe, at that time.
Yeah, well, what was happening was that Enigma, Greenwood was our original distributor. I'm screwing up your VHS tape here. Originally,
Capitol did a few.
yeah, we did a couple things with Capitol. All this political stuff back there because we wanted to go direct with Capitol, but they had a deal with Enigma, and Enigma was Green World, which I mentioned earlier, our original distributor. They morphed into Enigma.
Yeah.
And they had Poison and the Smithereens and Stryper and all these big acts. And what they felt at the time was like, all of our acts are going to be big, so we're going to spend all this money. And they ended up going bankrupt in 1989. And we were already to the point where we'd lost so many bands at that point to the majors that we thought, well, maybe we should just be with a major so we don't lose everybody all the time. But it was really hastened by the fact that Enigma was, you could see the writing on the wall that they were going to go out of business. Time it quite right when they finally went bankrupt and stopped paying us any money before we had a new deal. There was about a 6-month period of time. That was probably the scariest time for me at the label for because we couldn't get the deal done on time. and Enigma was not paying us, so we had really no way of getting income.
It's
So
like the tail end of '89.
yeah, so I went and got every single credit card I could possibly get, 22 credit cards, and funded the label on all these credit cards for about maybe 6 months. So we finally got the Warner's deal done, and then.
And that was 9, I believe, because the
1990,
first
yep.
record was Guar. Right?
Yep.
Scumdogs of the Universe,
Yep.
which was produced by Ron Gowdy, who was a staff
Who used to
producer.
be, yeah, he used
He was
to
a
be
staff
at
producer at Enigma.
I know, yeah.
Interesting small world.
Small world. It's a
Right.
small business.
But
Still.
Guar is like a staple of the catalog, really.
Yeah, they've been with us, pretty much for their entire existence.
But that was the evolution of the '90s. Everything started to shift. It wasn't exactly metal. It was all kinds of genres started to become more in the forefront.
And that's when you got Goo Goo Dolls, and you also did like Nevada Beach and a few more that kind of more.
Well, the Goo Goo Dolls we signed much earlier. We signed them like in '88 maybe. They were just kind of punk band.
Yeah.
But people forget they were from Buffalo. They actually played a show with Cannibal Corpse.
Right.
So they couldn't have been what they are now. Back really, then. Even when Name broke, they were not a pop kind of ballad band. But that was a song that exploded, and then they kind of had to write more songs like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to complain.
Because by the time the '90s rolled around, you had to kind of change things around. You still kept it metal, but you were still reissuing like Y&T live record. But you're also like moving really forward to what the '90s really became. Because
Sure, and the one of the really fun parts about being at Warner Brothers, in addition to doing all the old catalog stuff, which was amazing.
Did you work with Mo Austin? I mean, was that
Absolutely.
the thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Now he's a legend.
He's
in
a-
Burbank
Yep.
and the world.
Mo and Lenny were
Lenny
phenomenal.
Waronker.
I mean, after they signed the deal, we went to the very first WIA convention, and Mo was up there doing his big speech, and he said, I'd like to welcome Brian Slagel of Metal Blade Records, and they showed a big spotlight on me. I was sitting down, I was like freaking out. Going, wow,
You weren't expecting that.
No, it was insane, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, I have so much respect for those guys, and just being able to work with legendary guys like that was amazing. But one other thing that we did back then, which was really cool, we did a lot of marketing stuff. We did all the marketing for The Real Thing by Faith No More. We did Alice in
I remember
Chains. We did Soundgarden. We did Mother Love Bone. We did Circus of Power. As time went on, we did a bunch of stuff, and I was really good friends with the A&R guy who signed Alice in Chains. So really, from the beginning, I mean, I heard the
Nick
demos.
Terzo.
Yeah, Nick Terzo. I heard the demos and everything. So we're kind of involved as time went on. So even outside the Warner system, we were doing stuff at the end of it. Because Alice came a little later than all the other.
Now, did
stuff
it conclude because Mo Austin retired, I think, in '93 or '94?
Well, what had happened with Warner Brothers was Ice-T released a record called Cop Killer.
Yeah, Cop Killer, yes.
And when we signed with Warner Brothers, it was nice little Warner Brothers records, not any sort of
Not
big thing.
controversial.
Time Inc., which at the time was this gigantic company, bought all of Warner Brothers, the movies, the music, everything. So it became Time Warner Inc., this gigantic, massive corporation. So Ice-T puts out Cop Killer, it becomes a big problem. Everybody's freaking out, and the fact that it's on Warner Time Inc. is a big corporation, so this is a big controversy back then. So basically, long story short, what happened is that there was somebody at Time Warner Inc. whose job it was to read all the lyrics of every record going through the system to decide if it was appropriate for a Time Warner company to be involved with. And the first record we gave them was a Guar record, and they looked at the lyrics and said, no. So anyway, I was like, and then we had another record, and they were saying, you got to take this song off, and you change this, and I was like, that ain't gonna I'm just not gonna do that. I was very pro bands and non-censorship. So I remember setting up a meeting with Mo and Lenny and being freaked out, because I was basically going to go in there and say, look, I can't do this. If this is going to be the case, I can't do this. And to their credit, they were unbelievably cool about the whole thing, and so we understand. We don't like this either, so we understand what you want to do, and they let us out of the deal, and we got it so the Goo Girls could stay there because that made sense, and we all went on our merry way. And it was really kind of sad because that was the beginning of the end for the really cool big major labels that were not owned by massive corporations.
I think Earache went to Columbia, but that was just you two, really. I think,
Well-
or Noise went to BMG.
Well,
too.
what happened was it's kind of crazy when I think back on it. Like Sony and Warner Bros. Were fighting over us. Like I was being flown in corporate jets to New York to meet with Sony, and
Black Rock.
vice versa. Yeah, and these two entities, Warner and Sony, were like mortal enemies back then.
Sure.
So
Yep.
we were getting courted by both. Then when Sony didn't get us, they immediately went out and did Earache because they're like, well, we have to have a metal label now because they all hyped up on it. So they went and did Earache. Right after.
But that was the thing in the early '90s. It almost kind of became a joke where with all the trends, the grunge and whatever, they just hopped on so many metal bands, and a lot of these majors were just signing any bands in the early '90s.
Well, that's what killed it.
And it
Well,
did
the
kill it.
interesting
And
thing
it
was the bands that actually did survive had independent records first,
Mm-hmm.
and then, like, you think of Suicidal Tendencies, White Zombie was another one.
Now, was it tough too signing bands? Because I know, like with Roadrunner, if a lot A&R guys would try to court a lot of these bands, they would always want to hold out for the major deal. So
Yep.
you would discover these bands first, then the word gets around that, hey, Metal Blade and Roadrunner and Century Media are into this band, maybe we should hop on it. And so it was really tough for you to get your own
yeah, big
band.
time.
So that's
Mini bitty.
Interesting story about that was I remember Monty from Roadrunner and I and a couple other people would see Korn play some tiny little club here in Hollywood. There's like 15 people there, and they were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we go to see them again a couple months later, and there's a few more people there. And the next time we see them a couple months later, every A&R guy in the world is there. Because Roadrunner and us were trying to sign them. And then all of a sudden, word leaked out that we're talking to them, and the next thing you know, every A&R person.
Again, you had Cannibal Corpse was a huge, gem as far as the '90s go.
They're very big then, but the offshoot, Chris Barnes' band 6 Feet Under, actually in the 90s was way bigger than Cannibal Corpse.
Wow.
I mean, they were selling hundreds of thousands of records at their height in like the mid to late 90s. So all the underground stuff, we had Merciful Fate, King Diamond, Guar, Cannibal Corpse, 6 Feet Under. We had a lot of stuff in the 90s that did really well. People always thought, oh, metal was dead. It was dead in the mainstream because the mainstream didn't exist, but the underground was still very
particularly in
healthy.
Europe, it was huge, and that's about the time you got your European distribution. You weren't licensing anymore to Europe. You
Yeah, we started
Metal Blade Europe.
our own company over there about 90. When was it?
93 or 94?
93, 94? I should remember these things.
Well, you kind of had these blessings too. I remember seeing, obviously, if you saw Ace Ventura,
Oh yeah,
Corpse made an appearance in there. And
that was helpful.
the mainstream world got to know them, and Main Street USA got to know an indie band, even though it was totally extreme.
And death
Sure.
metal in general, that kind
On
of
the
broke
big
out
screen.
death metal to a lot of the mainstream.
Oh yeah, I mean, the fact that they replay that all the time is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
By the time the Warner deal ended, you were with, I think you had Priority for like the bigger releases, and Red,
Yep.
Relativity.
Yep.
And you've been with them from the get-go.
Well, we've
at
kind of been with them on and off since the very beginning, because we've had some stuff through them. So yeah, they've always been there. Even we knew that we couldn't put Cannibal Corpse through the Warner system. I was even before the whole craziness happened. I was like, this is not going to fly. And plus, we wanted it to be really underground.
Right.
So Warner was cool about letting us take that to Relativity, and so they've been there since then. And obviously around the same time, I can't remember the time frame, but eventually Sony ended up buying Relativity.
They were the
RED.
first
It was
person to really take an independent.
It was Sony,
actually-
BMG, and then
It was 50-50.
Yeah, and now it's Sony. So it's kind of funny because we're with Warner Brothers, now we're with Sony.
But the thing
All
about
over the
Metal
place.
Blade, always, I mean, not jumping too much to the future, but nowadays, they're really, all the major labels are selling out to Warner. I mean, the big news is, obviously Roadrunner being absorbed by Warner's. No matter who you had market and distribute your record, you were always in total control, creative control as well. And seeing that so many labels, independent and whatnot, are going, basically selling out to majors.
Sure.
What do you think about this? Would this ever happen with Metal Blade, or is this something you always want to keep on your own?
Nah, I mean, we've had enough interaction with the majors to realize the ups and downs of it. And look, this is not at all about money for me. This is really about the fan and the freedom of what we do. Like we can have a meeting like we did it today. We had a meeting at 9:30 this morning, and we implemented everything in that meeting at 10:30 in the morning. There's no board of directors. There's nobody that you got to go ask to have something happen. It doesn't have to go through 15 different departments. Like the freedom, I love that freedom. We can do whatever we want, whenever we want, and there's not enough money in the world somebody can give me to take that away from us, especially at this point in time.
Right.
Well, I think everybody's been gobbled up so much that I don't think anybody has any more money to dole out to buy anybody up.
Excuse me.
There's only 4 people, well, 3 now, because it's Capital Universal, such as Capital Universal. Who else is that? Sony BMG, which is together Sony and
Warner's.
somebody else, and Warner's, right? So it just kind of leaves you as you're the figurehead of metal anyway. You're the face of metal and the metal community. I mean, you're like what Clive Davis was to Arista Records, Russell Simmons, the Def Jam. I mean,
Sure.
you're basically that.
Yeah,
face.
I mean, look, there's also, there's not a lot of money for people buying labels these days, where the music industry is. So, But like I said, I really care about that. As long as we're able to do what we're able to do and have the freedom, the most important thing.
I think in this day and age, it's about, obviously the digital realm is really kind of taken over, as well as if you're going to do tours, that's where metal is, you know, the tour packages and the sponsorships, and the digital world with Spotify and these kind of getting it out to the people.
Well, the interesting thing about that, though, is that still, on a new release, 80% of what we do is still physical in the U.S. And obviously it's even more in Europe. So while digital gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and look, every year it's getting more and more, but still, it's still a predominantly physical genre, metal. And I think it's like I said, it's going to decrease a little bit probably as time goes on, but it's still there. Kids want to have something hold in their hand. Even the younger fans.
You think that the younger kids are still into that?
Absolutely. We have bands that have fans that 14, 15, 16 years old, and they love having the CDs and holding it in their hands. So it's still there. It's not like a lot of other genres where it's wholly digital now. It's still predominantly physical. I don't see that going away anytime soon.
I think with metal, it is pretty much the exception, where other music genres has gone more toward the digital realm.
But I think the internet is given it metal a testing ground, really. If it's going to stick on the wall, if it has sellability, it has a fan base, you could see it in the numbers, how many hits or whatever it is.
Yeah, we've completely embraced social media and the internet. I think it's the greatest thing ever to happen to music, because you can get right to the fans. So, we have the most Twitter followers of any metal label, the most Facebook likes of any other metal label. We put a lot of time and effort and resources into that, because it's this amazing thing where you can reach so many people so quickly. You don't need the third parties nearly as much as you used to. That being said, magazines and radio stations are still very important, but man, the ability to get stuff straight to people and have that interaction and conversation is phenomenal. And the fact that there's so much more access to music now than ever before. Everybody can listen to anything. And there's more people listening to music than ever before, too. And those people are getting turned on to all these different bands. And I think the great thing for us is the metal kids are so supportive, and they realize if they don't support the bands, they're not going to exist. So
well, the interesting thing about it is, too, the pop music world has really turned off kids, and they're looking for something that's real. And it's kind of come full circle. If you think about the 80s, and you think about now, it's the same type of kid, really.
Oh, yeah, totally.
It's the same type of kid.
And plus, too, with metal, I mean, the touring is always, right now with any music genre, touring's where it's at, because the CD sales aren't, it's all touring and merchandise, and metal has a hold on that. Particularly with the metal play bands, we were just talking about all the bands you had on tour. You had, all the different festivals, from the Orion to all the European festivals to the Mayhem. There's always 2 or 3 Metal Blade artists on those big festivals, and that's where it's going now for metal. Is all these big summer festivals and whatever.
Let's talk about
you're
your
able
bands,
to get
your bands that are on these festivals. You manage to get just about everybody out there.
Yeah, this summer is insane. Yeah, we've got 2 bands on Mayhem, 4 on Summer Slaughter. We've had up to 14 bands on the big European festivals. So, yeah, it's a good summer for that. And we know everybody at all these festivals, and all the bands play there. So it's obviously huge exposure for us. So we're happy that it works out. We work very well with all the promoters and stuff too to help. Because my attitude is like, if we build the brand of everything, the festivals, the bands, everything else, the sales will follow it. I'm not wholly concerned on, we just have to sell music. Well, we have to sell music, but we have to build the brand of everything. And if everybody's big, then the sales will come as well.
It's funny that branding wasn't called branding back then.
I know.
Branding is branding now.
I hate saying that because it's such a corporate word, but it is kind of true.
But it's very true.
You're building up the name of everything to make it worthwhile, and that's the important thing. If we all work together to make that happen as a scene for metal, then it's just going to get bigger and bigger, and that's obviously what we want.
All these years that kind of built up to now is really, you've got a well-oiled machine. Your staff is, everybody's in place doing their thing, and you are able to kind of really oversee how things move and where the trends are, what records you have to put out at certain times of the year. Does it get overly complicated, or is it getting a little easier?
No, I think it's getting easier, actually. I mean, well, it depends. It gets complicated because there's so many different formats now. Like, we're talking today about the new As I Dying record. It's like we're doing, a regular version, a special edition, vinyl, and, all these different formats. We're actually even talking about, I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but we're talking about doing cassettes.
Awesome.
Because cassettes are coming back now.
Really?
Who would have thought, all the cassettes we've destroyed over the years. But we're probably going to do it just for fun, just because people kind of want
Novelty,
it now.
that's cool.
So there's all these different formats. But aside from that, I mean, we've done this for so long, we kind of know how to do it, I think, so it makes it easier. We just roll everything out, and you're always adding different pieces that come about. And as I said earlier, social media is so huge for us as well. We
It
really
kind of took
push
the
on
advertising element out, that you had to spend a certain amount on advertising. And
You still do. I mean, you still have to play the game, so to speak. But all of our partners out there are still very important to us. The
Sure.
magazines,
Absolutely.
so we still spend a lot of money doing that. But also, adding in the social media part of it has been really cool, and it's really fun. So you can follow me on Twitter at Brian Slagel. Please.
Yeah, I follow Metal Blade. It's pretty awesome. I mean, there's always updates. It's constant.
Yep.
And the consuming of information seems to be part of consuming music, really. if you
Yeah,
think
but
about it.
it's that fine line where you don't want to overdo it, so people are like, "Oh, you're ruining my inbox," to where you do it the right way. So.
Right. So many.
Well, you've always been on the cutting edge, and you still are today with, the social media route and everything, and the cool thing is, you do say a lot of your stuff is still physical, but as far as the digital period, you say, it's going to probably get less and less of the people buying physical copies is where it's going. What do you see in the future of metal now, and how, less and less CD sales, and more people, not even digital, are buying it, but are able to get it for free, and not just the illegal means, but legal means by YouTube and Spotify and all these other companies. You could basically get anything on demand streaming, in kind of almost a legal fashion. I wasn't saying that, well, we're going to go, if you got away with all the illegal websites and illegal downloads, it would, music would go back to people buying music, but still people get them on YouTube, these other things. You could basically get it on demand anyway.
Well, kind of. Well, here's the thing is, I mean, there are companies that actually, can prevent the illegal stuff from happening.
Right.
They do exist, but my attitude is I don't want to get rid of I mean, you want to get rid of as many illegal sites as you can, but you don't want to get rid of everything else, because that's how people hear stuff.
Right.
And and the lucky thing is, and thank God for the metal fans, is they support the artists, and they realize
Very loyal.
if they don't support everything,
Yeah.
that it's going to go away, and they don't want it to go away. So they've been thank you
Yeah.
for supporting us, which has been awesome. But I think all those sites like YouTube and whatever, I mean, you can listen to anything now, which is fine.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a good way, because it makes you put out something good. If you don't put out something good, a good quality record with a good package, there's no incentive for people to buy it. So you have to step up the packaging. You have to step up the music. It has to be good. There's quality control now, which they didn't. 20 years ago, one of the reasons why the music business got so screwed up in the first place was there's no quality control. And you'd pay $25 for an album, there'd be one good
That
song
was the
on it.
problem, yeah.
Oh, and there was when it was like 5 bands, and then 5 years later you had 500 bands. Like, what are you going to buy? I mean, it's just, so the philosophy of Metal Blade has really stayed the same. I mean, obviously signing a lot of, really supplying the underground music scene is what Metal Blade is all about. The roster is still strong as ever. You got As They Lay Dying, Amon Amarth. I mean, it goes on and on. Genre-wise, too, you've got Unearth, it's like a hardcore scene, hardcore metal. There's so many bands that you've covered just about every genre. Where do you think this thing is going, really?
Yeah, get out my crystal ball, right? I don't know. I think that if you look at some of the bands that are doing well, and that are kind of currently doing well, like a band like Ghost, that we put out and did their first record. They signed this huge deal with Universal, and they're very much going back to their late '70s, early '80s style. And there's other bands like In Solitude that we have that we feel pretty good about. So it seems like that scene, that kind of in '70s and early '80s influence is coming back around again. Like a band like In Solitude from Sweden, 21-year-old kids, weren't even born when Number the Beast and all these records came out, but they're hugely influenced by that. So I'm being a big fan of that stuff, as we all are, because we grew up with it. Hopefully that's kind of the next wave. It seems like it is, but who knows? Something could come out from out of left field, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, where'd that come from?
How does this stuff get delivered to you? Or obviously, besides you probably have people that you feel are trustworthy in a sense. Or
the whole staff really is just one gigantic A&R staff. Like, we encourage everybody to look for stuff, and you never know where you find it. Somebody in Buffalo will say, "Hey, I saw this really good band the other day that we from a radio station or a record store or something." So we get hit up all the time from every angle. The social media stuff is huge now, because we get people sending us Facebook and Twitter and everything, thousands of
the interesting
fans.
thing with the internet, there's no surprises really anymore. Like there used to be, where a band came out, like, what is this about? I want to learn more. Or my friend's talking about this.
Sure.
Now it's like, okay, well, you know this band from Denver because it's on the internet.
But that's the cool thing is that you can share with all your friends all over the world, and that's that's a fun thing. I mean, we used to do that with the old-fashioned tape trading days, and it would take forever. So now it's just more instantaneous.
I want you to tell me when you went to a show and you were flat out surprised by somebody that you didn't expect. Just any time, any period.
Prior to hearing a record?
Yeah.
Well, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think. I mean, if you go back, it's harder to do these days because you hear and you know way too much going into something outside the box here. But the first time I saw Rammstein live was just insane. I mean, I'd seen the videos and I heard the first record, and they came over here really early on.
Was that the Palace show? Or
Palladium.
KFM.
I'd actually seen their stuff when I was in Germany. I liked it, but just going to the live shows, just completely blown away.
Greatest live band ever, man.
Yeah, well now they're on this other level that's just insane. Yeah, probably the greatest show.
And
ever.
one of the bands, all of us did, but especially you, Iron Maiden. I mean,
Oh,
you've
yeah.
been an official diehard Iron Maiden fan.
Yeah, I'm still trying to plot how many shows I'm going to see on this upcoming tour here. So
I just want to give me the best Iron Maiden show that you ever seen, any era.
I can actually do that pretty easily. Strangely, I mean, I've seen them probably 250 times. But I was very lucky. I had like one of the greatest weeks ever in London in 1980. What was it? 84. I saw Dio twice at Hammersmith Odeon, and then I saw Maiden 2 times when they're doing World Slavery Tour. And Music for Nations, who we talked about earlier. Thank you, Martin Hooker, wherever you may be, had gotten me these amazing tickets for one of the shows. They were like, Hammersmith was all seated. It's a very small venue. Like we thought, it was this huge, like,
And it's
Long Beach
legendary.
Arena or something.
It's
Legendary.
9,000,
It's like
yeah.
3,000 or
3,500.
3,500 or something. Excuse me. So they got me tickets about 9th row center, and there was like 8 rows in front. There's a little walkway, and then the 9th row here. And I saw Iron Maiden about 15 feet in front of me in all their glory on the World Slavery Tour, and I was just freaking out. And at the end of the show, Bruce throws his wristbands out, so he threw one of them out. And I just happened to put my hand out and landed in it, and nobody saw it, so I just went dove behind me trying to kill everybody to get it. I was like, dee, 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 dee. So that show was still to this day. I mean, they're always amazing, but that show was to see them in their prime in that setting in London, right in front of you, center stage, 15 feet away, was insane.
You saw them obviously since the old Diano days, and you've always been real close with Smallwood and the band since the beginning.
Especially
Good
Rod,
friendship.
probably even more so with the band. Like I think I've talked to Steve Harris once.
Right.
But Adrian and Bruce, I know Bruce pretty well.
Right.
And, Rod's always really good to me when I'm out on the road. So it's
Well,
fun.
talk about Metal Blade's history. I mean, you've tended to keep a lot of the bands that you began with since the early '80s. Not many levels to say that. You look at Lizzie Borden, Armored Saint, still going strong with these bands. Lizzie out there, obviously doing very well in Europe, doing a lot of the festivals. Same with Saint. They're going to be going to Europe this month or next month, doing some festivals.
Yeah, I mean, we've been, incredibly lucky to have these bands, Fates Warning and Cannibal, Iguar, and, all these bands for, Amon Amarth, 20 years now of Amon Amarth, which is kind of insane. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, they're all really great people to work with, and they're all really good friends of mine, too. So I think we've always had a good relationship with everybody, so we've been lucky enough to keep them over the years. I guess we're doing our jobs all right.
Right.
Let's talk about 2000. The bands that are just kind of there happening. I mean, you got a pretty good relationship with them. And
Yeah, it
they
seems
seem like they want to work. All the bands want to go out there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
tour. All the bands want to record. They want to get their
What-
music to be heard.
One thing I noticed about, things seem to change every 10 years. You had, in early 80s, things changed, early 90s, things changed, and the early 2000s, things changed. And one thing I noticed about bands from kind of this last 10-year era, like whether it's As I Die or Black Dahlia or Unearth or all the bands we talked about, they were younger kids, obviously, 20, 21 years old when they first started, and they were really smart. Like, much smarter than I was when I was 21. I had no idea what I was doing, but they were really smart and really easy to work with. They knew what they wanted. They knew how the business worked, which really kind of blows me away that those kids were so smart back then. I think that's one of the reasons why that scene has become so huge, and these bands have had nice long careers because they're really smart kids, and they knew early on what they wanted and how they wanted to do it.
I think it's like, if you think of my son who could get on the computer when he's 5 years old. For us, we were trying to still get antiquated when the computer came out. Of course, we're up to speed now, but so what would you say to a young band who's really starting out? And, how would they reach a person like you, or not that,
Well, that's easy these days. You can tweet me or Facebook me or something. I think the biggest thing with any band starting out is you have wherever you're starting out at, you have to cultivate your local scene and get a name for yourself there, and use all these tools that you have, the social media tools, the Facebook stuff, to get your name out there, because it's still, there's so many bands now, and there's so much competition. It's very difficult to have it rise above that. You need to have teams of people around you that can help you with, labels and managers and agents. You got to make sure you get the right people. Somebody in the band's got to be a business person. I know no artists want to hear that, but it's a business, and if one guy in the band doesn't figure it out, you're gonna be in bad shape, because you have to remember, labels, managers, agents, lawyers, they all work for you, for the band. The band doesn't work for us. It's the opposite way around, and most people don't think of that, but that's really the way it is. So you've got to have that business entity within yourself. And every successful band, whether you're Metallica, Guns N' Roses,
is a cottage industry.
Yeah, I mean, they all have somebody in the band that deals with the business for the band that gets it, and that's vitally important.
Absolutely. In closing, 30 years of Metal Blade. Where do you see Metal Blade going? You see it lasting another 30 years? Or are you going to, after you're gone, you're going to have someone else take over Metal Blade? Where do you see it going? The future, not just the future of music, but the future of Metal Blade in general.
I mean, look, I'm still having fun, so I'm going to do it as long as humanly possible, and then we'll see how it goes. But things change, and we embrace the change. We're embracing the technology and everything else. So I'm excited about the future, because I think that metal-wise, metal, when we first started, always like, heavy metal will never die. It's never going to go away, and people thought it was a fad. And now it's a genre that's not going anywhere. It's here.
Stronger than ever, perhaps.
Exactly. I think it's healthier than it's probably ever been. So it's still fun. And it's still fun doing what we do, even though there are all the challenges within the business. But being an independent label, I think we've been able to overcome that. So, the foreseeable future is just more of the same. We've got a lot of young people working here that are coming up the ranks, that are taking over some of what we do. But
do you have any special things that you think Metal Blade is really special for that other labels don't do?
I don't know if we do anything that other labels don't do as much. I think probably the biggest thing is that this is the only independent metal label that's run by one person. It's owned by one person. So I'm the be all end all. Right. So you can't call up the owner of these other companies. You have to call up somebody else. But here you can come straight to me and get the information. So I think that's one thing we can really offer, is that it's if you need me, I'm here. I'm not difficult to find,
right? And
you can get an answer really quickly, and it's not so easy for some of the other labels.
All right. Well, 30 years. What real quick can you tell us you got coming out in the next few months on Metal Blade?
We have new Whitechapel record just came out, which I absolutely love. Then we have As Lay Dying in September, Between the Buried and Me in October, and a whole bunch of other stuff coming out. That's all the big stuff, but look for everything.
To get in contact with Brian, you could always find him on Twitter, on Facebook.
I'm everywhere.
There you go.
Find.
All right.
Yeah, we just want to take an opportunity to thank you, to take a time out of your day to do this. This is great.
No problem. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Old school. I like it. Old school, guys. The way it should be.